Well, hello, welcome back to Riyadh, welcome to the Countdown Show, and welcome to the Day of Reckoning, now just hours away from perhaps the biggest boxing event ever put on right here in Riyadh, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We cannot wait for this. I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Clark and Gareth A. Davis. Gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about the weigh-in. Now, were there any surprises? Andy, I'm going to bring you in here first.
Not really. When you look at the weights, they were all pretty much where we expected them to be. I did wonder if Joshua, having put on some weight under Derek James, might have taken a bit off under Ben Davison, but he's exactly the same as he was for his last fight, just 1 pound heavier. And other than that, I was thinking Parker might be a bit lighter than the last fight because they went straight back into camp basically, and given the shape of him this week, that looked likely. And he was, but only 5 pounds, which in heavyweight terms, in percentage terms, is very, very little. Wilder was exactly where we wanted him to be, where he was back to against Helenius, because he was much heavier than normal against Fury. Obviously, so many doubts put in his mind after that second fight. So it was what we expected weight-wise. We got a push from Jarrell Miller or Daniel Dubois, which didn't come as a massive surprise. But I generally feel like if you draw a push from your opponent, then that's a bit of a win. It would have been a bigger win if Daniel hadn't reacted to it, if he just kind of laughed at him and shrugged. But I think he's won that battle this week, Daniel Dubois, and I wasn't expecting to say that.
Yeah, well, let me bring you in on this one, Gareth. I mean, that was really the flashpoint of the weigh-in, was the shove from Jarrell Miller and Daniel Dubois, and then Daniel Dubois being held back by security. I believe Frank Warren got a little shove as well from Miller as part of it all.
He got a bit too close.
What did you make of it?
Did Mr. Warren, didn't he? I think he suspected something was going to happen. Jarrell Miller has been lighting fires all week, and we want him here for that reason. I quite like it. You could tell he'd had an effect, just on this point specifically, he had an effect on Daniel Dubois. In Daniel Dubois' interview afterwards, you could tell there was a bit of shakiness in his voice. He got a big dose of adrenaline. And this is a key fight for him. This is a fight where he has to get respect from Jarrell Miller early. It's a 10-round fight, remember? I think if it goes beyond 5 or 6, I hate to say this for young Daniel, obviously he's had problems against Joe Joyce and Alexander Usyk in the past. Jarrell Miller hasn't fought at that level, but he's vastly experienced. His body belies what he is as well. And if I was to add a few things to what Andy said...
G-Man, we need to hear a little bit more clearly.
Sorry, gents.
Is this your first rodeo, Gareth A. Davis?
I'm sorry. I'm acting like a neophyte here. There's all levels of microphones that we use in this job. Some want them down by your navel, etc., etc.
Yeah.
If I could say one thing, that in terms of the body language of people today, Bivol for me looked very powerful. Anthony Joshua's got an air of menace about him that I haven't seen for a while. I love his weight. I think he's been sparring hard. The word I'm hearing is devastating in sparring. I like the look of Deontay Wilder. How is that man so devastating at that weight? Muhammad Ali back in the day was that weight in his peak, 215 to 220 pounds. Joseph Parker, I agree with you as well, Andy. He looks so lean and well, you can't write him off. I think he might get exhausted as the fight goes on, because Wilder's got that weird way of stalking people, and he's stalking someone with a bomb in his right hand.
And he's patient as well. He can be very patient.
He only needs one opportunity. It's an amazing card. I don't think it's the greatest card of all time. I think it's the most stacked heavyweight card of all time, because I think if you compare it, one of the greatest cards of all time, they need to make it a Rumble in the Jungle now, or a Thriller in Manila, or the fight of the century, by what our guys do when they step into the ring in a few hours' time. On what is now, we'll always remember this week and this day as that day of reckoning.
Look, for the benefit of those looking to purchase the pay-per-view this evening, it is indeed the greatest card of all time. just to let you know, press that button.
It's the most stacked. There's no question about it. But if it goes, listen. The events over here, the 2 events so far put on by His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh and his team, the Riyadh season, I've been doing this a long time, over 30 years. I've never seen the like of before. As big as any big event in Vegas, all I'm pointing towards is, come on guys, deliver now on what's been presented on that stage. I hope we walk away going, most stacked card, best event I've ever witnessed.
Well, let me bring you in on Otto Wallin, Andy. I mean, he talked about how there's going to be a new king, and the new king is from Sweden. He has carried himself with so much confidence this week. Every time you ask him about his confidence, he's like, well, duh, what do you expect? I am confident. I think I'm going to win this fight.
Yeah, and that's a sign of... That's kind of meta-confidence in a way, isn't it? He speaks confidently, and then when you question the fact that he's speaking confidently, he's surprised that you're questioning his confidence. There's layers to it, you know. It's but it's been good from him. We've enjoyed talking to him. He's an intelligent guy. He understands the scale of the task ahead of him, but because he's already been in with Tyson Fury and acquitted himself well, he's not daunted. We were talking about temperament, Gareth, at the end of the stream yesterday, and one thing we know about Wallin is that he does have the temperament because he's been in there with Fury. He isn't going to freeze against Joshua, and that's a big question when somebody's stepping up a level. If for the first time they're on a massive promotion, this isn't his first rodeo, and that's key.
Yeah, he's a natural lefty as well. He's actually left-handed. He's watching him signing all the posters left-handed. Any man that can come out into a weigh-in of this magnitude on the most stacked card in history, to ABBA, by the way, as well, you've got to admire.
Absolutely.
For a start. Obviously, Sweden's greatest ever group.
No, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Shout out ABBA.
Shout out ABBA, and he shouted them out. He's been that 12 rounds with Fury, 47 stitches in the gash over the right eye. Fury went after him in that fight and couldn't put him away. The reason I point the fact he's a natural, genuine left-hander is he thinks differently. They create different angles. As we both know, as all of us know, this is a sport in which left-handers prove problematic for people, especially ones who know he's very good at range. He's got a fantastic engine. He never punches himself out. It's later in the fight it's dangerous for Joshua in this one. That's why I think Ben Davison and Joshua have hatched a plan of meet him, throw combinations. I really hope, one of the things you will have both complained about Joshua in recent years, maybe the last 3 or 4, doesn't throw enough combinations. I think if he can do that with enough regularity, with enough spite, and early on in the fight, I think he can get him out of there in 5 or 6 rounds.
We're just talking there about the southpaw element there, Gareth. And look, people talk about Alexander Usyk, of course. He is a genius. But the last time Anthony Joshua boxed a southpaw before that, similar dimensions to Otto Wallin, his name was Charles Martin. He was dealt with within a couple of rounds, and Anthony Joshua became the world champion. However, was that a different Anthony Joshua?
Oh yeah, it was. It was the kind of wrecking ball guy who was... He didn't have scars, perhaps. And I think what they've tried to do is surgically remove those scars in this camp. I think Ben Davison, I've thought it before they made their union, Ben Davison was always going to be a great character to have in the corner for Anthony Joshua. And he's been asking his advice for a long time, by the way, I've learned this week. Davison, young man, wise old head on those shoulders, very, very clever technically, particularly in exchanges. That's why I've noted he is as good as anyone on earth in terms of seeing what other people do and how you box with them. Similarly to Andy Lee, who will have done the same with Parker and Wilder. They're those kind of tactical, technical brains. The thing is with Joshua, I think Charles Martin didn't believe anyway when he fought him. The difference, as you point out, is, Andy, Wallin believes. He truly believes. And if this goes down the stretch, the longer it goes, if Joshua's still pouring out and he hasn't made his mark, Wallin will believe, and it'll be a very close fight if it goes to 12 rounds, in my view.
One of the thoughts out there is that Otto Wallin has brought out a fire in Anthony Joshua. He's stoked the fire. Anthony Joshua at times can be short with the media this week. We've seen that. And Otto Wallin has been very vocal. He's been talking about mentality. Has he stoked a fire in Anthony Joshua?
I think it's possible. With somebody like Joshua, he's been around this scale of event for such a long time that early in your career, you can buzz off that. If it's the first time you're doing something, if it's the first time you're coming here, which of course it isn't for him, if it's your first time on the scale on a stage like this, which of course it's not, you can also feed off an opponent trying to get to you if it's the first time that's happened. Nothing that happens to him now is the first time. So I think he just looks at things like that and regards them as just a hindrance more than anything else, and just chooses to try and ignore them and try and keep as grounded as he can, which this week has translated into him being a little bit tetchy at times. He's kind of done it in reverse. He was grumpy on Tuesday and he's gradually loosened up since. So I think he's just taken in what Volin has said to him. I don't think it's bothered him at all, but you can still use it. You can still use it for that final little ingredient just to throw into the pot late on in the week, and I think that's maybe what he'll be doing.
If I could add to that, to go back to that air of menace he's had, he didn't have that at the press conference in London. I've looked at Joshua this week, the aura, the shape, and he looks like the star on the show. He's acted like the star. He's acted like the big I am, and he needs to. He's in the Super League now. Queensberry, His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, they have created in the last few months the Super League of boxing. Winners go on, losers go home. Snakes and ladders. Joshua has realised, he's got his main man, he's over there, Eddie Hearn with him. He's realised, make an impact here, look good. He just needs to win, frankly, but look good. He's right at the top of the Super League. And it's going to be bingo for him from here on in, because they like him over here. It's his third time here, as you rightly say. He's headlined twice. He's both rematches. He's won one and lost one. He knows what they're like. I think he's very popular over here.
Yeah,
there's something
I think
about
they
him.
like him. Yeah.
I've noticed, I think they really like him. This is Joshua's chance to really. This is Joshua's chance to really get into the Super League.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, it appears, I think it's pretty widely publicised that Anthony Joshua will be going on last. Now, there is a chance that just before he goes on, Deontay Wilder has already done something spectacular in the ring. He may not. He may also get beat. He may also get upset. But something's going to happen which is going to alter the heavyweight division just before Anthony Joshua's fight. Does that put an additional pressure on him?
I think at that stage when he walks, he's got to rule out those thoughts. I think everything's got to be on Otto Wallin and what they've drilled with Ben Davison about the exchanges in the first 2 or 3 rounds, which I know are going to be key in this fight, about what Wallin does very well and what Joshua's going to implement that he does very well. I think that's what his mind will be on him. Davison and Barry and those in the team, all those close to AJ and his team, will be saying, just watch Wilder, but ignore it for now. And he knows that in his mind.
You think they will watch him?
I think the monitor will be on in the dressing room.
Watch it.
But
I think
it
watch
won't affect. He's just got to win. It's about him winning. It's not about what Wilder does. But like you say, it's going to be great for us if Wilder's just knocked out Parker, or he's been beaten on points by Parker, or even stopped by Parker. Who knows what's going to happen? But if Wilder's won, we're all going to be urging Joshua. We all want to see Joshua Wilder is one of the very biggest sporting events of our generation. Fury and Usyk on February the 17th is historic. 25-year event, you know? Haven't had it since 99. But this is one of the most thrilling fights in history if you can get Joshua and Wilder in a ring together.
And the only thing I point to there about Joshua potentially seeing Wilder do something incredible before his fight, take us back to 2019 where Anthony Joshua was going to make his US debut, and roughly a month before, Deontay Wilder absolutely blitzed a former opponent of Anthony Joshua in Dominic Brazil, which felt like it put a bit of pressure on Anthony Joshua to kind of match that.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And then the week of that fight, Wilder announced his next opponent, and that was timed deliberately to try and steal the thunder. And then we saw what happened at Madison Square Garden, which will still go down, always will do for me. It's just one of the most dramatic things I've ever seen in my life. Watching Ruiz do what he did at a packed garden and the seemingly invincible Joshua fall apart was just, it was mesmerising. And that's what these big heavyweight fights can do to you. So he'll be well aware of that. I think it'll be on in the dressing room. They won't be watching it with rapt attention, but it'll be on in the background. So he'll know what's happened by the time he walks to the ring. But it just won't really matter because he just needs to win. He has to win. If he could win and look really good, that'll be great. But ultimately, he just needs to win.
Do you know, Day of Reckoning comes more and more into focus, to be honest, to be so les mots justes, I might say in French, because Jarrell Miller was obviously the guy that was pulled off that New York card. That night when Joshua lost to Ruiz, it was akin to Mike Tyson losing in Tokyo in 1990 to Buster Douglas. But what we've come full circle now, and all the players are back on the chessboard. We're going to see this whole era play out in the next 18 months, 2 years. I don't know if you gents think so as well. I think we'll see every fight that we ever wanted to see in this era now.
I think it's exactly that, Gareth. It's like these guys at Saudi Arabia, Riyadh season are sprinkling that magic dust over boxing. We are all here benefiting from that. Just one final thing on Otto Wallin now. When he looks across the ring on Saturday night, he will see Anthony Joshua, a man who has beaten him a couple of times in the amateurs, and behind him he will see Ben Davison, the man who masterminded, I guess, or was certainly in the corner for his only defeat as a professional to Tyson Fury. What do you think will go through his head?
Well, he knows that Davison's very clever, but Otto's convinced himself, because Joshua wanted a rematch clause, they're running scared. They fear defeat. As he's rightly said, he said to me in an exclusive interview a couple of weeks ago, and I loved this line from him, and it was definitely the top line, Anthony Joshua, in recent fights, he's not the guy I fought as an amateur who's a raw, reckless kind of road warrior who wanted to take your head off. He's now a guy who fights not to lose rather than to win. He knows all those things. They're all going around his head. I think he'll disfocus, if anything, on Ben Davison. But I think Davison, in my view, this may sound biased because I'm a huge fan of what Davison does. I think he's key in this.
I think one way that he's rebuffed that, though, Otto, is he's pointed out that was Ben Davison's final fight with Tyson Fury.
Very
so
good.
if he was
It's a
that
good
good a
answer
coach,
from Otto.
Very
then,
good.
why isn't he still with him? And that's what I mean. He's an intelligent guy. He's thought about, I think, the kinds of things that people can throw at him, and it always pays to do that as you go into a fight week, to not rehearse exactly, but visualise a little bit what might be happening, have your own kind of plan of attack. I make him right in a lot of what he says. Joshua has been hesitant, maybe since that Ruiz fight. He has been. I don't think he's really committed to his punches in the way that he used to. We need to see him rediscover that. I don't think he really needed to against Jermaine Franklin, so we saw what we saw. Against Helenius, he took his time, but then he did knock him out. If he takes it a step further against Wallin, then I think Wallin's in trouble. If he doesn't, then Wallin can win that fight.
Long way back if Anthony Joshua loses on Saturday.
Too far back, I think.
Well, so, he can't contemplate it. As I said, this is the big time now. We saw, people call it a tantrum. When he fought Alexander Usyk here in Jeddah for the second time, I had him 5-4 up after 9 rounds. And he got fiddled out of the result by a brilliant, majestic boxer in Usyk. The belt throwing, I don't call a tantrum. It was frustration at himself. He cannot allow that again. He's an incredible figure. Athletically, he's alarming when you stand next to him still, isn't he? It beggars belief what a giant athlete he is. He is an Adonis. He's the watchword of an Adonis. He's so driven. He wears silk pajamas every day. He's so wealthy. He doesn't need to be doing this, but he's so driven. I think we will see that thing from him tomorrow night or tonight. We'll see him deliver what he hasn't been able to do for 3 or 4 fights. He's got to, in my view. If he fiddles around and wins a sword fencing jabbing match with Wallin, people won't believe in him in that fight against Wilder, and everyone's going to say that Wilder will just go through him and knock him out. He's got to prove something.
Well, listen, there's another heavyweight on the card who believes that if you put anyone in a room with him in the world, only he would walk out of that room. The quite terrifying Arslanbek Makhmudov. He seems like a real menace, Andy Clark.
He does. We enjoyed chatting to him when we were here last time at the end of October. He's quite softly spoken, actually, when you talk to him. Quite a thoughtful guy, but he is just a terrifying-looking individual, and a lot of it is the brow. It's not just the sheer physical size; it's that kind of beetling brow that he's got when he's got his hood up, in particular. So he has got a real aura about him, and you could see that when he was standing in front of Kabayel. He was towering over him and making sure that Agit knew exactly who the boss was in that situation. He just can't afford to be intimidated, the German fighter. He's been waiting a long time for this, and he wants to take his opportunity. But you look at Arslanbek and he fancies this. He really wants to make a mark. He feels very at home here. He comes here, has been for years from what I've been told, and he wants to become a fan favourite here. He got a great reception last time, but he's still largely unproven in a lot of ways.
I was going to say that. He likes to deliver. He flays when he throws, and he leaves himself open, and that's what Agit Kabayel has been looking for. I've spoken to him about this. As you say, it's Kabayel's moment. Kabayel's got a fantastic physique to get in and under Makhmudov, who I really rate, by the way. I think he's a future world champion. If we find out that his chops, it's like he's eating sandwiches if he gets punched, and he doesn't move, and his whiskers are good, I think he's nailed down world champion. But Kabayel will test his whiskers, I hope.
It's two unbeaten heavyweights. It's that kind of winner stays on feeling, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And for somebody like Kabayel, as we said, he's a two-time European champion now, and he ended up going back to that European title because having vacated it the first time, it just didn't quite happen. That fight with Fury looked like it might happen, then a fight with Joshua looked like it might happen. In the end, neither did. So he regained that European title, which is a big title, but this is the opportunity. And fighters on the right-hand side of the card, they will all go in believing that they can win because you have to. But some of them will also know that win, lose or draw, if they fight well and they entertain and they show that they are here to bring everything they've got and leave it all in the ring, they could get another call.
The showcase.
Yeah.
The showcase of proving, are you in the top 8? Are you in the top 12 in the world? There is going to be a Super League, a tournament of fighters. You want to be visualised. You want to be ranked in the top 8 and the top 12 by the people here, not by the sanctioning bodies, by the people here in terms of what you deliver. It's a showcase. It's a showcase for all of us, but it's a showcase for him particularly. And a lot of the fights on the card, same as Junior Farr and Frank Sanchez.
Yeah.
Sanchez is so talented. He could emerge as the guy of the night in this.
This is the place that they all want to be here.
Yeah.
All heavyweights in the world want to be fighting here. And the best heavyweights in the world currently really are. Of course, there's Fury Usyk coming up as well. Let me just touch on a couple of the other fights. We've got Lyndon Arthur taking on either number 1 or number 2 light heavyweight in the world. He's really up against it in this fight, and he's been widely written off. But there is a kind of belief, Pat Barrett thinks it's going to be all about the mentality for Lyndon and not reading too much into it.
You just have to believe in yourself and what you can do and what has given you success in your career up until that point. And you really can't, if you're Lyndon, think too much about him. He is a really good fighter, and he admits that he's watched Bivol and he's been a fan. He has to banish all that from his mind and just think about the fact that he's got someone in front of him who will have to operate under the same rules as him. And if it's tough early on, you've just got to try and not hit that panic button. Keep your boxing together. And again, just remember what you do well and do that, which for Lyndon is jab and move. You know, he's got a good jab and he moves well. As I say, if it's tough early on, if it gets hot quick, the worst thing you can do is think, you know, I've got to try and stop him. He caught me there. I've got to catch him back. I've got to equalise. Just stay in the fight.
To add to what Andy was saying there as well, Lyndon obviously has a fantastic jab and he does move very well. He's very tall and rangy as well. And Bivol doesn't mind standing off and boxing you. He fights in bursts. I think if I was going to pick the top 5 most efficient technical boxers, pound for pound in the sport, he's in the top 5. There's no question about it. He's beautiful to watch. I think he stops Arthur myself. I think again, talking about showcase. For Lyndon, it's a showcase. Do the rounds with him. Push him to the limit. I don't see him beating Bivol. Bivol is extraordinary for me. I think he is the number 1 light heavyweight. I think he'll beat Artur Beterbiev. Beterbiev beats Callum Smith. I just think he's got it. He's just so beautiful to watch. When he did his workouts this week, just the way he moves. And in a fight, Terence Crawford springs to mind as well. They're the 2 most efficient fighters I think we're witnessing in sport in the sport of boxing at the moment.
Just before we round up here, there's another guy I just want to talk about who may well be, should Anthony Joshua come through, it might be this guy who he fights next, and Filip Hrgović, who's the IBF mandatory challenger. Now, he's got Mark Demori in front of him, who is being widely written off. He's going to try and make it a short fight. But what are we expecting from Filip Hrgović?
I think we're expecting a victory, and we're expecting him to stop Mark Demori. I think if I was going to pick one fight on the card where I'd put my house on a guy winning, probably shouldn't because it's heavyweights. One punch can change everything. I'd say it's Hrgović against Demori. And I think it's a stoppage in the first half of the fight. I think it's a 10-round fight, isn't it? I see it in the first half of the fight. Hrgović has got something to prove and show. As you say, IBF could be his next year. If that gets scattered, that belt leaves after Fury and Usyk have fought. And I just think Demori, the trouble is I see the Demori that lost to David Haye about 9 years ago. And I just think, even though he's got a very good record, and that might have been an off night, and Haye was a very dangerous, devastating heavyweight, he was just looking to knock you out. I just think Filip Hrgović is due a performance. I thought he squeaked through against Zhilei Zhang. Well, if I'm honest, I thought he lost by a round, by a point. And he didn't look brilliant last time out. He laboured to victory. I think it was at the O2 Arena, or wherever we were, the Copper Box, or wherever we were. I think we were Talk Sport that night.
Yeah, it was against Dempsey McKean, wasn't it?
It was
he got
against
the stoppage
Dempsey
in the
McKean.
final
Where was
round
that?
in the end.
Was that Copper Box? Can't remember.
I think
London.
it was on the
London.
Joshua card, wasn't it?
It was London anyway, wasn't it? He laboured. I think we need to see something clinical from him here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gareth A. Davis.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Andy Clark. And thank you so much. We are now just hours away from, well, what I am calling the biggest show of all time. Cannot wait for this co-main event, the return of the former unified world heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua against a tricky Swedish southpaw in Otto Wallin, and the former long-reigning WBC world heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder. It's a former WBO world heavyweight champion Joseph Parker. Do not miss it.